to you about here. So again, to recap, left, right, liberals, conservative, wheels are coming off. Both groups in the time of Christ were opposite spectrums. They don't like each other, but they teamed up against Jesus with the aid of Judas. Both groups, liberal and conservative, are developing their nation, and they don't like each other, but they will have a common enemy in the end, and the common enemy will be God's people. Because if they're conservative, God's people are not with them. And if they're liberal, God's people are not with them. But they can join up with each other, and this is our current events talk, and go against God's people. That's important to note. So again, whatever you don't overcome in this life will gradually overcome you and work your ruin. And we see how it's ruining the nation and ruining people, because they make it that you must take a side. But each side does not make sense. You can't go with the liberals if you're reasonable, and even more so if you're Christian. And you can't go with the conservative if you're reasonable and you're definitely a Christian. So what do? So most people find themselves in a no man's land. And that's the reality even in churches, in society, in families, and so forth. Like you have to make a choice. Now our text for this week has been Revelation chapter 3, verse 21. And it states here that to him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame and am sat down with my Father in his throne. So we have to be overcomers, right? This is what the Lord asks of us, to be overcomers, to overcome whatever besetting evil, sin, whatever besetting weaknesses that we have. Because if we don't overcome, then something is overcoming us. And whatever is overcoming us will gradually break us down and then ultimately work our ruin. And we don't want to be ruined. And we see how it is working the ruin of the society. And we don't want this to happen to us. Notice here, I'm going to, before I go to some text, I'm going to go into what I'm talking about, because I want to just talk with you. So they are both groups, and they're pushing so hard to their core sin. So whatever the core sin is, sins that were given to them or what is supposed to be part of what they do, liberal, conservative, left, right. They have core sins that's been a historical, established sins of them. So it was with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There's core, they just represent two groups. And in society, that's how it is. I think it was Martin Luther, the great reformer from the Dark Ages. He said Christians are like drunken horsemen. Don't quote me if it's him, but I think it's him. I remember this said. They're like drunken horsemen, that he says when they get on the horse, they're going to fall off to one side or the other, but you don't know which side. So somebody comes to the Lord, they get baptized. To me, it's even they come into life. They just birth. You see a child born, and you're looking at a child, you say, they're going to choose this side, but what side are they going to choose? You see a Christian, it's the same thing. And they start riding the horse. And they're going to fall off, per se. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to overcome these things. You're going to fall off to the left or to the right. And sooner or later, people fall to the left and they fall to the right. And then they take those stands and they make those stands become their Christianity. They're not straight. They're crooked. But Christ said we need to be going the straight gate. And we need to strive for righteousness, not for taking political stands or left-right stands. So you never meet a person who's going to flourish as a Christian, be left or right. Because how can you be left or right? You need to be center and, steady, stable, balanced. But you find people go to the extremes. And when you're in churches sometime and society, people kind of force you that you have to choose one or the other. But each side now is leaning to their core and becoming more absurd and more ridiculous. And we know how that always played out. So because they're going to their core sin, soon the wheel is going to come off and the barge is going to turn over, because that's what's happening. Soon it gets so horrible that they push so hard that they're pushing, that, as I said, the barge will turn over. And that's what the Bible predicts. The barge is going to turn over soon. Just like what happened with Israel, they went too extreme and you could not bring them back into the center. They became unreasonable. And you have met people. They only want to hear information from a left point of view or a right point of view, liberal point of view or conservative. They're not interested in truth. They're interested in what's right. They're just interested in being ridiculous. And they only go to certain sources. They go to a liberal source, which would be like a MSNBC or stuff like that. And then they go to a conservative source, which would be like a Fox News. And that's their source. They go to a liberal church or they go to a conservative church. They're not interested in truth. And so if you're caught in that washing machine and you step out of it, they say, why you step out of it? Because I can't deal with this type of blender business and mix up and craziness. I need to keep my sanity. But they want you to be part of one or the other. Like, I can't join the crazy people over there. So notice here, the liberals, you get them with this homosexuality, gender confusion, attitude. All the females and even the males in the liberal world, they have attitude. That's their, I guess, banner. I think they should just have a shirt, right? Attitude. Everything they do is always with attitude. It's flair. It's excitement. It's pizzazz. It's colors. It's bright. And what all that brightness is just to cover a bunch of nonsense and darkness and nastiness. But they say that nastiness is, because I have an attitude. Yeah, it's nasty. And that's what it is. And they become very aggressive. And all they seem like, to me, they're working themselves up is more STDs and more destruction. So they never learn. So it don't matter how much monkeypox and AIDS and, and beat down, because they're full of attitude. Sometimes it's not even the STDs, it's just the attitude. And no matter how much beat down they get, they're like, fill with attitude, because everything is attitude. They can't talk to normal and just act normal and act straight. To me, dealing with a guy or a female that is filled with attitude, it's just weird to me. It's just weird. Because to me, it seems like certain females believe like that's how they're supposed to be able to always talk. And like, listen, I'm talking to you here, just talk normal. And no, they can't talk normal. It has to be just all this heap of flair. And like, listen, I'm not talking to the community here. I'm just talking to you. We just have a private conversation. Nobody needs to see that we're talking. No, they can't act. And the guys are like that also. Very strange. You're talking to them and they're talking like, listen, it's a private conversation. We just need to talk here. We're just communicating. We don't have to have all this whatever. But anyhow, that's who they are. And you don't want them to deny themselves. So you leave them because they're working towards it. But the conservatives now, on the other hand, they're just always filled with all this hate and war and going back to the dark ages. To me, that's their flag. They should have shirts. One should have attitude on their shirt and the other one should have going back to the dark ages. And what is the dark ages for them? Where men were real men. And they're just losing their way. And they're both losing their identity. Because it seemed like one group believing that attitude is the whole thing, and the other group believed that dark ages was when it was all. This was when it was real good. So that's why Hitler tried to take the conservatives back to the dark ages. He wanted the Third Reich, wanted when men were real men, and they were above 6 foot tall. So this is the premise and what we see going on in society. So when we see this, we see that whatever you don't overcome will overcome you and work your ruin. But in their mind, they're thinking, if I could just get to Saddam, the liberals, and life could just be like the Saddamites, then they would win, because that's what they want this society to be. They want the young kids, everybody to be like Saddamites, because that's what the Bible told us, that even the kids were Saddamites. The liberals want us to go back to slavery and back to the dark ages. They intended to push us back in that, the conservatives, to push us back to the dark ages. When, as I said, men were real men and women were just being raped all the time. Children were being raped. As you know, the Catholic Church, when you go worship with them, that's why they ultimately, America, as the Bible tells us, will go back and give power to the beast, go back and give power to the Catholic Church, because that's the pedophile church. That's the church you go to, where little boys, naked little kids, not even boys, but these are toddlers almost, are painted on their wall. And all you find is all this monastery. As a matter of fact, yesterday, this famous singer, all of a sudden I'm blank on her, but this famous singer Let me pull up who she is. All of a sudden, I forgot who this lady was. But anyhow, this famous singer died, and it remember about her brought to mind this very famous incident where she had gone on Saturday Night Live, talking about current events here, Saturday Night Live, and tore up a picture of the Pope. But she's from Ireland. And this Irish singer, which I can't remember for the life, I don't know what I can't remember her for, but this Irish singer who had tore up the picture of the Pope, she was, she was, she was, she was protesting the priest abuse. And I remember reading about it, and Joe Pesci, I think his name was, or something like that, said that he'd have slapped her if he was there and saw her do that. But the funny thing about it is, here you have a woman now, a woman from Ireland, which, if you go do your Google search, you find out that they've uncovered mass graves of kids that these priests were killing and raping. But a man who would say, I will defend that man in Italy, in the Vatican, and I will slap a female, was not man enough to go protest the abuse and the murder of these kids, but would slap a woman who he's supposed to be more man than, right? That was protesting and risk her career over it. And then after that, Boston Globe, men that got Boston Globe finally have the honor and the dignity to talk about the abuse of the Catholic Church, which was going on for forever, from the Dark Ages. But yet she is defamed. But the men were given an award for that article, just to show you how weak these people are. But they'll say they're men. But a woman was protesting it and lost her career over that. And yet this is the type of environment we live in. This has always been the environment. You have all these Judases. So you have Jesus, not saying she's Jesus, just don't get me wrong there. I'm just simply saying, you see how sometimes these men are rapists and they'll defend their other rapist friends. And they're criminal and they're doing all kind of warmongering. But the aim is they're saying, oh, no, I'm conservative. I'm defending against whatever. But you'd be like, yeah, but why you don't defend against the kids? But they seem strong, but they don't seem strong to protect against the kids because they have to go up against other men. But they'll go up against a female. But if you saw the story of the liberals and the conservative with Jesus, you find that it was the conservative that led out Caiaphas. Caiaphas led out in the murder of Jesus. And to justify what he's saying, he found an insider in Jesus' ministry to make it look good. And then he and the conservatives, this liberals, sorry, went ahead, voted together and said, let's kill him. And then they get the brutish Italians or Romans to execute him, to do the nasty, the dirty job, because they don't know what they're doing. They're just brutes. So this is the narrative. So when you see this type of stuff happening, oh, Sinead O'Connor is her name. So when you see this type of nastiness happening, you got to recognize what's going on. You got to recognize the society and the environment we live in. So when we talk about what you don't overcome, will overcome you and ultimate work you ruin. For us here, especially the Western world, it is prophesied that ultimately the same situation happened to Jesus, where the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the liberals and the conservatives, gang up together, find a slimy Judas, and use him to go against him. This is the narrative of our everyday life. This is what we live and see every day. Notice you find the conservatives, they love finding a black person like a Clarence Thomas who will go against black people because they find it like, oh no, we against them because we want to take them back to slavery. That's our own purpose and modus operandi. Because life was good when we could rape the whole slave plantation. So we now like to find some, Owens, no, not Owens, I can't remember her name, but this black younger girl. We like to find them silly people. And they're Judases, so they will always go against their own people. And we give them a few 30 pieces of silver, and they'll speak all day long against their own, right? And we pay them, and they're good. And it sanitize what we're doing because they say, oh, at least there's a black person that is saying this. So, notice, because they like going against black Americans. It's like they like to make black Americans look bad. And anybody, Pakistani, Indian, they can find so a lot of Asians to go against black Americans, to make black Americans look bad. Because, oh, look, they get out, they this, that. And then the best is when they find a black American themselves to go against them. You know, there was these two sisters, I think one of them died, and they were the biggest supporters of Trump. So this is where the wheels coming off. Because, you, as I say, you have a, Ellen G. White says it best, there's a play, and the play, the, the parts are already worked out. There's Jesus, there's Judas, there's disciples. They're going to run because they're afraid of the wicked people, the wicked Romans, the Sadducee, which are the liberals. Anything goes. They don't believe in anything. It's like a party at the church. And then you have the Pharisees, the head wicked people. And that's our society. And that's the narrative. And when you understand that narrative, you read articles, you look at the society, you look at what's going on in your world, in your church, you be like, that's the church. Any church you go to. And it makes it very clear, the Bible makes it very clear. Any church you go to, any group you go to, they always have these both groups, and they fight, they contend. But whenever a righteous person turn up, then they go against them. Because that's the whole narrative. They hate both of them. Because, well, remember, one is so liberal and anything goes. And then the other one is conservative, and it says hate and war. And as I said, they love the dark ages, because that's when they were having their winnings. So they're both pushing at it. So yesterday I was reading this article, right? And it's an article that it's a prosecution, right, that was brought against one of Epstein. Epstein is the guy that was I think is an American New York financier that was accused of taking kids and having other rich people, rape them, and he would rape them and stuff like that and abuse them. And he's accused of that. And I think they claim, hang himself in prison. But one of the billionaires that he was hanging with is accused of raping a 16-year-old autistic child. So the billionaire is accused by the government of, they bring a case that, so 16 the girl is now 30. She's autistic. She has mosaic autism. At 16, the accusation claimed that he was at Epstein's apartment in New York. She was there to give him a massage. And while she was there giving him a massage, he forced her and raped her. Now here's this, with an adult toy. Right? So he raped her with an adult toy. So that is just now, to me, that's not even rape, that's malicious. What is that all about? To me, that should be probably a death penalty case. So he raped her. The accusation by the government is stating. His lawyer says the accusation is frivolous. And they're going to defend it because it sounds crazy. I'm not saying he's guilty or not guilty. I'm just saying the accusation sounds so crazy. The girl is now 30, so this happened 14 years ago. This is wild accusation. This is a multi-billionaire going after helpless. Notice the aim is always to go after the helpless. Children, people are disabled, people who are poor, people who are black, people who are weak. And to go after them, and then now the government is saying this is what happened. Now, I read all of that, and I would never bring something like that to discuss publicly until it's a guilty case. But remember that as I say, you can't bring something like this to me to discussion. Only the government could bring a case like that because, and the lawyer says that it's a reprisal for something. I'm not clear what he was saying it's a reprisal for. But it's a multi-billionaire. No, think about, to me, that case, right? He's being accused of that. But my question is the first question I'd want to ask is the setup, not the rape, but the setup. Why was there in an apartment in Epstein apartment in New York, in that apartment, was he there? Number one, if he's there, was that happen? Then number two, was the girl there? And was there such a thing now as having an autistic girl at 16 massaging you? I'm not asking, I would never ask the question of, if it's a frivolous case, is there any of the thing truth? Because when you hear these type of stuff, I don't even doubt this type of stuff anymore in the sense of is he guilty or not guilty. My question is always this: are you there? Were you there? And was she there? And why is she there? Is she part of a foster system? Because most of these people, when they abuse children, they abuse people who are part of foster care. This is something is well established. They like to go after kids that are helpless because that's their mode of operandi, it's survival of the fittest. But they think fittest is you eat the weak and the sick. And this is their philosophy. This is not my opinion. So it speaks to me of the topic I'm talking about, which is my theme for this week. Whatever you don't overcome will overcome you gradual. Knowledgeable child and a child with mosaic autism. Why would you be there with that? And that would be the question, because that alone, to me, you should probably go to prison for that. Just much or less the accusation, probably to me, I think that should be a death penalty thing. So. But remember, in this time period when this was going on, those men, especially rich men like Donald Trump, multi-billionaires, remember these men were even Microsoft, Bill Gates, has been accused of hanging around with Epstein. Why would you be hanging around a person like that? And those men are their primary people to say that we need to have laws in America and we need to make sure, number one, arrest and put in jail the black rapists. Remember, that's the environment. You see, the context is important. When we talk about current events, you don't read an article like that and you don't think about the context. The context is not an isolated incident. The context is who are these people? And what was their mode of operation? What were they saying they're doing? They were the champions for justice against evil. They were the Batman and Robin, I think. I don't know. Is that the people from New York that was protecting America and protecting New York? They were the champions to make sure that justice against evildoers was being meted out. So when we understand the context like of a person like a Donald Trump, who is a conservative, who was championing black rapists to go to prison, and who has been accused and has at least one defamation case. So the government and the jurors, which is American Constitution, that the juror of her peers should trust, think that he was lying when he says he didn't rape the lady. He is the darling of the right. And when you think about who murdered Christ, it was the main leaders of the church and the leaders of the political system with the liberals and the conservatives. And you can see why. Because although they're saying justice, 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 no mercy. If a police shoot a black guy running and shoot him in the back, great, 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 because you need to take out the trash. But while they're doing that, they say, hey, look over there, look over there, look over there, look at the black guys over there, look over there, look over there. But that's the context. And if you're an honest person, you will say yes. I mean, for me, that's the context I grew up in. I heard the context, especially if it's a black American. And I say that because I'm not a black American. I was observing their behavior. And I'm saying, wait a minute, they smoke weed. According to the government statistic, here's what's even so biting. According to government statistic, on a ratio, a percentage of per 100,000 people, crack was being used at the same or higher rates in white community. But the black guys all went to prison. Marijuana, big usage. Look at the amount of marijuana store pop up all over the place. But who went to prison for that? When I was in Jamaica as a child, a young man growing up, I would see white older men, middle-aged men, coming down, buying marijuana by the container load. But when I came to America, they said, oh, only black guys are drug dealers. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And they say, yeah. Who go to prison for drugs? Oh, black guys. I said, but the people who turn up in my community and stuff like that to buy the drugs were white. So where did this narrative come from? But to me, that's the whole concept of, think about it. You're going for a person who is less criminal, and that would be brilliant. Because That to me is the most brilliant theme of a movie of a movie you could ever hear. Because what you do, you point to the rapist over there while you're raping them over there. You're raping autistic kids. You point to the drug dealers over there while you're the biggest drug dealer. You're taking it by the container. He's selling basically probably ounces. And you're selling container loads. And you say, he's the criminal. Lock him up. You see, this is the brilliant plan. So when you look at this idea here, that what we're really dealing with is a left-right ideology, but both groups are corrupt. It's a liberal conservative idea, but both groups are corrupt and they're playing a game. But here's why I say the wheel is about to come off or soon to come off, coming off. The problem with Judas is that Judas wasn't a student of what Christ was saying. Christ was telling him the wheels are about to come off. Christ was telling him, I'm not going to play this game anymore with these liberals and conservatives. I'm going to allow them, this is my point here now, I'm going to allow them to run the game. You see, Christ was always evading. Christ would slip out of when the Galileans, his own people, tried to murder him and throw him off of a cliff. He slip out. He slip away from them. But what Judas didn't know, because Christ was telling Judas, I'm not going to slip away all the time. I'm not going to stop them. Sooner or later, at a certain time in prophecy, when the clock struck this night, I'm going to say, I'm going to give myself up. Did Judas hear that? Nah. And Judas now going to fall into a trap. The Pharisees are going to fall into a trap. And the Sadducees are going to fall into a trap. And Christ is going to set the trap for them. But in their mind, Christ was trapped. And what we know from prophecy, you get your way. You go conservatives. Let's bring us back to Papa. Bring us back to the Dark Ages. Because the seventh last plague is coming. And the warning will be given that if any man will go back to the Catholic Church and serve these pedophiles and rapists, what a girl lose her career over, that he will be destroyed. But they will not hear that because they don't believe. And they believe because they're so, as I say, they're so overcome, and it's being gradually building up, overcome by their sins, that they will not hear it. And they will not respond to it. They'll just go right in the head because they think, oh, this is like a game. Because they've been playing a game. Since 1844, since the end of slavery, since 1776, since 1798, those important dates, they've been toying with going back to the Dark Ages, going back to slavery, going back to that darkness. But sooner or later, God's going to say, I'm going to give it to you guys. You want to go back to the Pope? Go back to the Pope. But it's going to be a beatdown. See, but the Pharisees didn't realize that what they did, they just destroyed the nation. And that's important. So when we understand what's happening, we see that sooner or later, just like the Sodomite story, sooner or later the Sodomites will get their way. Sooner or later, there comes a disease which is going to wipe them out, even more than AIDS. But they don't see that because in their mind, they're talking about, they need freedom and they need all of that so they can take this world and turn it into a cesspool of homosexuality and stuff like that. But they don't see that sooner or later, they'll get their way. God's going to say, oh, you want Sodom? I'll give you Sodom. And that's what's happening. This is our environment that we live in. It doesn't matter if think about January 6th. There's an article that you can see online where DeSantis, the Florida governor, fired one of his workers because he had shared some Nazi memorabilia. I'm like, why are you firing him? Listen, they keep toying with this thing. Why are you firing him? The whole idea, the premise of conservatism is to take us back to slavery. I don't know why anybody. Have you not thought about this? That's the whole premise. The January 6th thing, why was all that type of stuff to link with Nazism or think about the war in Ukraine. What is the war in Ukraine about? No, I remember following that for years. That place is filled with Nazi. You go do the research, watch the videos, see the interviews. The Azov style war that went on in Azov or wherever that plant was, it's filled with Nazis. That's a fact. That's not something controverted. That's a fact that was being reported by Western media. So when you see Americans supporting, why they fall on the side of the Nazis again? But they were supposed to fight against the Nazis. See, they keep toying with this stuff. So when you look at what's happening, And you see how each group keep going to their core and they keep toying with this thing. America gave up slavery because they were forced to by the North, so to speak, because of civil war, because they wanted to break the nation. And they fought against this wickedness. And then they gave us Jim Crow. Then that came to an end in the 60s, started really in the 40s after the World War II. World War II. They desegregate, President Truman desegregate the military. And after they desegregated the military, they start pushing for civil rights, and civil rights come. But then the whites again, that's our conservative, especially the pastors, they push and you get war and drugs. And war and drugs again, war to put black men in prison. Okay, it worked. They put all the black men in prison. So they got their way. They keep toying. Then they give us this president who again had a history of trying to put black men in prison for rape, while all his friends and colleagues were just the biggest rapists, including himself, is accused of raping all these people. And all these black men were accused of raping and were lynched. But when we see, not an opinion now, a fact of in Ireland, in Canada, in different places, mass grave with little kids that were raped by priests, but they want to go back to the Catholic Church, back to the Dark Ages. And this is what they keep toying with. And you'd be like, why you want to go back to that? Why you want to go back to the Third Reich, which is what Adolf Hitler gave us? Because he believed he was 6 foot tall. Think about it, Adolf Hitler, 6 foot tall, 6 foot plus, blonde hair, blue eyes. What a joke. And he's trying to say that's a superior race. And that's what he wanted to bring us back to. Because they account, this accounting that they have is so wrong. So notice here now, just because someone said, what are you talking about? They keep toying. Now, I'm sure you heard about, this is an example, right? So there's this guy who's a singer, country singer. I only know him because there was a mass shooting at his concert in 2017. So I'm not really familiar with anything that he's singing. I think I need to familiarize myself a little bit, just for research purposes. I need to familiarize myself with his music, because if mass shootings is happening at your concert, I was going to say his funeral, but his concert, then I must think there's something about this guy. It seems like whatever he do, darkness follow. This guy must be very dark and sinister. I'm saying that, I'm thinking he must be, because what I'm going to say to you next. Because I'm just thinking, man, he had one of the biggest mass shootings in American history happen when he was singing to his followers, and his followers died. Like, as I say, I say crab, it's a pigs in a bucket, or crab in a, I don't even know what you call it. They have the saying that they say, where you shoot in a bucket. So this is what happened to him. So the name of the guy is Jason Aldean. And what they're saying here is that, to bring you up to speed for current events here. So Jason Aldean put out a music video. And in the music video, he's saying, try this in a small town. This is important. Hopefully I don't forget that part, what I'm saying here. So try this in a small town. He has a song that he's basically saying is pro-police, I think, yeah, pro-police. And what is he's pro? He's pro-America and pro the flag, pro probably soldiers or whatever. So he's saying the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff like that what they did in protesting Black Lives Matter in big cities, which is where black people are. Now, that's the thing that America does. America say black Americans are in cities. Well, they never tell you why black Americans are in the cities, because if most of American history, black people were in the field, in rural areas, what happened, America, as they say, why black people end up in the cities? What was going on in the rural area that black people fled to the cities? They never answer that, because that's a painful answer. So they never tell you why our black people from Africa were living in tribes and living, in villages and stuff, brought to America on fields to work the fields. And then now they end up in cities. Why did they flee to cities? What was going on in America that they fled to the cities when they had the opportunity to run, take up their foot and run with it? So Jason Aldean now, back to this interesting character. I need to do some research on him. It seemed darkness followed him. Put out a music video saying what they did in the Black Lives Matter protests, they could not do it in a small town. Yeah, that's what they said. They couldn't do it in a small town. and then he showed clips of people showing the finger to, like they show a white woman showing the middle finger to the police, people spitting on the police, stuff like that, person lighting a Molotov cocktail. Well, within quick time, people who were savvy enough and had time to spend on this type of stuff, I didn't. I just saw the article, read it, and move on. Showed that the protest that the woman was showing a finger to the police, or middle finger to the police, was actually a woman, I think in France. It's a French woman, not in America, not Black Lives Protest. They took the clip and insert the clip in the music video. And they say, why would you insert a clip from France with a woman showing her finger to the middle finger to the police, and then say and attribute that to Black Lives Matter? Then they found somebody again who had the time on their hand, I guess, and thought it was important, which I think they sooner or later God gonna allow people like Jason Aldean to get their way, because the Lord want them to get not Lord want them, but Lord is hoping that they don't, but He's gonna give them the 7 plagues. So then they show a clip now of a Molotov cocktail. Then somebody go and find that the clip is a clip you can buy. Actually, I saw the clip. I clicked it myself. You can actually buy the clip. It's just a clip that you can buy from one of these websites that sell clips. The clip was not a real clip. So they fake. Then now there's a clip where he removed the clip, because the clip, another clip now from the video, he literally took it down and reinserted the video without the scene. It's a 7-second clip, and they took it down, right? They're removing clips from the video, because all of a sudden people are saying the video was misrepresenting what was saying. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here because this is emblematic of a problem. Number one, Jason Aldean says that you cannot try what happened in the Black Lives Matter protests in a small town, because a small American town, you will never be able to do that. But you could try it in a big city. Remember, Donald Trump, Epstein, and all those people were from big city. Number one, I'd say that. Let's get that out of the way, because that's not important to what I'm saying. Well, me as a person, me now, Lloyd here, I grew up in a small town. One thing I can say about small town is not what Jason Aldean is saying. Small town is run by people with small minds. I'm saying that from a person who grew up in a small, I don't know if you call it a town. It's not a village and it's not a town. All right, something in between. So I didn't grow up in a village and I didn't grow up in a town. I remember when I was young, there was a situation happened where there's some no good, according to what I was told by my mom, that there were some no good guys chase and beat somebody in the community that was a decent person, but they had jealousy for them and got away with it. They chased the guy, and they chased the guy through my yard. I saw it. I was shocked. As a child, I was shocked. Like, what's happening, Mom? Right? And I was like, see, that's how I grew up. I grew up where you could have vigilante justice, not because of vigilante justice, but because somebody is jealous or hate somebody. That's how I grew up. So somebody would say, Lloyd, you grew up in a small town. Yeah. You saw what small town justice was like. Yeah. What is it like? It's like what you see in the big cities. You say, what are you talking about? So I'm going to tell you something. What I saw, and I believe it to this day, that here's a bunch of evildoers. They're jealous of somebody or they hate somebody. They frame the person, and then they chase the person down with small town justice, knowing that they have that little face any penalty, and they almost lynch the guy, beat the guy, as I said, to near death. If I was older now, they would have to take me on, because I know I'm gonna answer that. I guess there's somebody online make a statement. Replaced the gospels with politics, or it's a question. Hopefully, if you're sticking with me, I'll give you an answer to that. I'll give you an answer. Just stick. If you could just stick with me. You think it's politics? Uh, as I say, if you read the Bible, um, you stick with me. I'll answer you. If you're, as I say, it's Larry. So if you're man enough to stick around, I'll answer it. I'll give you an answer. But let me finish my thought. So small town justice is to murder people. So when I came here and I hear somebody talking about that says they if you could try that in a small town, I'm like, I grew up seeing what small town justice is. Small town justice is you have haters and people who don't like people to take out people who they don't like. And that's basically how I see it. There was no justice. And that was a problem. So when you have systems in place to deal with things from a high level, you got to put those systems in place. And so remember now, like now, I'll give probably 2 or 3 answers to Larry here. When the black people fled from small towns across America to the big cities, why did they fled them? Why did they go to cities where they could get protection? They fled there because this is the reality. They didn't flee there because it's better. So what Jason Aldean is doing is leaning into conservative hate. And I'm going to tell you, sooner or later, the conservatives will get their way. And they will take us back to the dark ages. And they will take us back to that time when men were real men. And those men were rapists. And those men were killing people and robbing people and doing all these things. And they could get their way. Because that's what it is. So when these silly people say, try it in a small town, here's the answer for Larry. Think about how many white kids you see missing on the billboards or whatever it is in Walmart and on milk cartons, but they never find the rapists and the people who kidnap them. They will always find a black guy and lynch him because when Aldean did that video, he did it in front of a known, courthouse. That was a scene of multiple lynching of black men that were accused of rape. But while this was happening, these priests was sodomizing and killing their kids and never got arrested. Think about that. Think about how across small town America, how many white kids are being taken, raped, and put in shallow grave and never got arrested. Never got arrested. But yet that is small towns. So when you look at what's happening and you say justice was never being served in those small towns. Those small towns don't have no set of justice. That's a reality. That's not an opinion by me. That's just a fact that in those small towns, you never had justice for certain people. Because those people were doing the rape and killing kids, they always say, hey, look, go lynch that guy over there. You never see a mass murder and the police always reach after the mass murder has been taking place. They never have look, all of the things that they do with the NSA, whatever, to snoop on people, how they never snoop and catch one of these mass murderers. They always get in there after they wipe out the school. But somebody will say, oh, you can't try that in a small town. Small town? What is a small town? What is small town justice? But this is what they will tell us. So when we talk about morality, notice you'll never hear a preacher in America talk about morality. They talk about prosperity gospel. They talk about once saved, always saved. They talk about the good life. But when they ever hear talk about right or wrong, it is their modus operandi to never deal with morality, because if they deal with morality, they'll lose their big mega churches. That's a fact. So when we see this type of stuff, there is a situation happening down south. They arrested a guy in Georgia, but he was a pastor in Georgia, in Pennsylvania. But he finally got arrested in Georgia. What happened to him? And this is in the news this week. He finally confessed that a pastor's wife, a pastor's child at 8, that he raped and murdered her. And that happened 50 years ago. Why was he never investigated and found? Because in a small town, you don't find rapists and murderers like that. But you will see they say, oh yeah, but we get our guys. Who get who? No, look again. Look at the story. You find the story online. Reported this week. He raped and killed an 8-year-old. And 50 years later, by some happenstance, they found out who did it. 50 years ago, they weren't arresting people like that. The child that was killed was a pastor of another church that both of them had a Bible camp. The girl was going to the Bible camp. He catched her, raped her, punched her twice. She actually died from blunt force injuries to her head. Why was she raped? But they never addressed that. But they say, oh yeah, you can't come to a small town and do that. Yeah, because you can go to a small town and rape the little kids. And you can find little kids, as I say, all over the place. But they'll say, oh, no, we have justice here. Justice for who? So this is the problem. And that's where the problem is. So we're talking about justice and morality. Don't tell me that in small towns you don't have the sheriff corrupt. Don't tell me in big towns that this don't happen. But people say, oh, it happened in big towns. So remember what I said. Both groups, liberals with their, rainbow, leaning towards a sodomite lifestyle, will ultimately, biblically, get what's coming to them. The conservative, with their hate and stuff, trying to bring us back to the Pope and bring us back to the Dark Ages, will ultimately, just like with Judas, God will ultimately say, you have your way. Judas got his way. The Pharisees got their way. The Sadducees got their way. And everybody got their way. Whoever I'm missing there. And Jesus just said, go for it. And that was the problem. Judas didn't realize that sooner or later, they were going to get their way. And Judas was going to get his way. And Judas thought he was going to get 30 pieces of silver. And just like what Christ did all the time, he would slip away from those who came to arrest him. But this time, after he kissed the Son of Man with a kiss, Jesus said to him, thou kissed the Son of Man? You kiss me? I'm not going to skip away this time. They're going to grab me and kiss. And I told you I was going to do this. What we know in America is that sooner or later, the conservatives are going to get their way. The liberals are going to get their way. And they're going to find some Clarence Thomas or stuff like that to betray somebody in the inside, to betray God's people. And they're going to get their way. And then the jig is going to be up, because then the punishment is going to come. The beatdown is going to come. And that's the problem with that. So don't, as I say, don't tell me about, oh, this conservative Trump, he's for arresting black rapists. But he's accused of raping how many women? Don't tell me about the Epstein and stuff like that, because they all got away with it. Don't tell me about black people is more susceptible to crack and cocaine. We are all sinners, need of grace. But what they do, they tell us that say one person is more righteous than the other. And all we find out is that, like what happened in Ireland, they're still uncovering mass graves because the Catholic Church and the priests didn't stop raping. And who will protect them? Catholics, who they are their kids were raped by these priests. And that's why they protect them. So notice here, I'll take some text to go close. In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 1, it says, he that being often reproved harden his neck shall suddenly be destroyed without remedy. Shall suddenly be destroyed without remedy. So when you're talking to people, you're telling people, listen, you need to stop and lean off of this thing. And they keep leaning into January 6th. Because they're going to take over the country, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Sooner or later, they harden the neck so much that there is not going to be no remedy. You can't talk to them. You can't tell them, say, you need to stop that. And that's the problem. You cannot talk to them because they're so ignorant that they think that they're going to win. And they think that they're going to bring us to this liberal utopia where men have become women and women become men. And there's all this type of gay sex and, as I say, anal sex with mixing sperm and feces. And they think that's it. It's going to be glorious. And it's not going to be glorious. It's going to be destructive. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 14, we read onward. We read, moreover, all the chief of the priests, plural, And the people transgressed very much after all the abomination of the heathens, and polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. This is the problem there. Both sides are sinners, and they're sinning much. Both groups are going deeper into their core sins. The chief priests, the people, so from the head to the tail, they corrupt. And nobody's calling and said, listen, we need to turn back to morality. You know, we find that in prophecy, sooner or later, the call is going to go out, that there's trouble. Think about what's going on with the global warming. I'm not a proponent of the concept, so to speak. I'm a proponent of the reality. So there's a conservative that say, we need to drill, baby, drill, because we're from Texas and down south. We have oil. Drill, baby, drill. The liberals are saying that we need to have conservative, we need to conserve the nature and stuff like that. And they sometimes do weird stuff that basically oppress poor people just the same way. To me, it's like two groups of evildoers. But at the end of the day, this summer has been strange, because this summer is the first time in, I think, recent history that what we have tornadoes running through winter, tornadoes running through summer. Normally, tornado season calm down in the summer, calm down in the winter. So it seems like now we move into a period of time where we have all year. Now, if you're conservative into Bible, you should say, well, that could be a result of people sinning, and because they're sinning, what's happening is that God's retribution. If you're scientific and you're into science and stuff like that, you could say, well, there has to be something going on, the global warming. But obviously something is happening. The temperature of the water in the sea, the temperature on land, there's something happening. Fires everywhere. There's fires in Greece, fires in Tunisia, fires in Algeria. Something is going on. Fires, as they say. But one could see and say, well, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're at. If you're biblical, you could say, well, this is end times. If you're conservative, you should say, well, this is end times. More sin, more retribution. But if you're scientific, you could say, yeah, I think there's something wrong with nature. But some people, you can't convince them anything. So that's why they're going to die much. And the Lord God of their fathers sent them by his messenger, rising up betimes, and sending them because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised their word and misused his prophets until the wrath of God rose against the people, till there was no remedy. Therefore, he brought upon them the kings of the Chaldees, who slew their young men and with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon man, maiden, old man, or those that stoop with age. He gave them all into the hands of the Chaldeans. What we're dealing with here is simple a matter of simpler matter of, I can't deal with that right now, but it's a simpler matter of that each group is pushing the society to their polar, but each group is pushing it to a sinful polar. One group is telling you that you need to go conservative because we need to save America. The other group is saying we need to go liberal because we need to save America. We need to have rules and liberality and freedom for everybody. I agree that we need to go moral and we need to have freedom for people. But the end result is that each group is pushing the society to more sinful, abhorrent behavior. Not dealing with the real sins of society, not dealing with the real criminals in society. And what that is going to push us to is, as you say there, an apocalypse, or you could say a great awakening. It's a great awakening to the beatdown of God that's coming. And that to me is what's happening, because the more this going on, the more things going to get brutal. Can't deal with all that. But I read this to close. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12 and 13. Say, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. Meats for the belly, and the belly for meats. But God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So simple what we're dealing with here is that whatever you don't overcome, liberal or conservative, will overcome you and ultimately work your ruin. This is what we understand is happening in the society. And this is what we understand is supposed to happen based upon biblical prophecy. We as Christians are not supposed to partake in this polar opposites that's been pushed in the country with the liberals or with the conservative. We're supposed to be straight and we follow Jesus. We don't follow Judas. We don't follow the Pharisees, the Sadducees. We don't follow the brutish Romans. We follow Jesus. That will put us in a different camp, and that we judge things righteously, and that we don't follow these crazy people doing these crazy things and these hateful things, because it will not work and it never work. As I say, the liberal lifestyle with the Sodomites never worked, and the conservative lifestyle with all this hate and going after people who God created in their image, in his image, but they said the God didn't create them, they're less of a human beings, that won't work. And we can't go with either side. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you for your word and the blessings of knowing thee, the only true God. Pray that you may be with us, dear Lord, as we go through the rest of this day. And truly, dear Lord, may we follow thee wheresoever thou goest, and not follow these extremes in secular society. This is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow morning, where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.